Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Doodle Robot, and also my name is Autistic Robot. This video is going to air on 2 channels because I'm starting a new channel. But today I've come to talk to you about stimming. And right now that is what I'm doing. I'm stimming. If you'll notice, and I'll get into definitions and whys and all that in a moment. But for me, I have recently discovered that how I stim is to take 1 or 2 or even 3 colored pencils, or sometimes even some paint, just 1 color paint, and do a background or do a section where I don't have to think about anything at all. It's just the act of coloring that 1 color or those 2 colors, or painting that 1 color. This is my best stimming thing that I can do to calm that, I don't even know how to call it, that anxious brain or something. But let's backtrack a little bit. I'm going to put this away and we're going to talk specifically about stimming. So you can see here, I'm going to raise you up a little bit. Patience here. My desk is a mess, so ignore that. You can see here, I've almost finished the background of this page, and I have plans. In this video, I'm talking to two different demographics. I'm talking to the coloring community, and I'm also talking to the autistic community. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here and there about ideas for the autistic community and ideas for the coloring community to be able to color and give your coloring goals some momentum sometimes when you don't have that energy to color, that energy to be creative. So that's kind of my goal for this video. So let's backtrack and start at the beginning. But I want to show you, this is one piece that I've started, and I've started it because I needed to stem. And so I just needed to have that repetitive motion where I stem and just let my brain relax for a little bit. Here's another one that I'm working on. This one's even bigger, but same concept. I specifically looked for something where I could just do a background. This happens to be just 2 colors. And what I was doing here was stemming, basically. All right, so let's backtrack a little bit and talk about stemming. What is stemming, first of all? Well, actually, before I get to that, I've got a lot of notes here that I wrote down. Before I get to that, I want to say that in November, I believe it was November, I discovered, and I'm pretty positive that this is the case, that I am most likely autistic. And that was brain blowing, I will say. I recently moved. I'm making lots of life changes. I was in a very bad situation for 3 years in a town teaching, and that ended my teaching career because I went to a school that was horrible. And so I've been making changes, and I got a job in a new state, in an actual town in civilization. Before I lived in the middle of nowhere. It was awful. And I met a lady, she's my boss, who happens to have 2 young kids. They're 3, they're twins, and they're autistic. So we were having lots and lots of discussions about her autistic children. And it was interesting. As a teacher, it was sort of interesting. You hear, you get special needs kids all the time in your class, and many times, their IEP comes with autistic, needs these certain accommodations, etc., and so on. Although, from a teacher standpoint, I didn't really know or understand what autistic was. I just recognized, they don't train us for that. Teachers do a million jobs, half of which they don't get trained for. That's probably why there's a teacher shortage. That's just a side note. But, I'd heard the word, I knew what it was. Rain Man, I knew it was a spectrum. I knew there was kind of high functioning and lower functioning. I don't really like those terms, but I believe that's what they called it in education. And so you know how your phone spies on you? Well, in my feed of YouTube, which I kind of obsessively watch, or used to. I haven't really had time so much since I've moved, but I kept getting all these things coming into my feed about um, female autistic traits in women, and I'm be like, I just want the coloring videos. Why are you giving me these things? And I know why my phone is giving them to me, because my phone overheard me talking about autism with somebody, and it picked that up and it started putting it in my feed. So one day I'm coloring, and actually I can show you the page I was coloring. I have it in this pile over here. And I was actually stimming while I was doing that. I didn't know it at the time, but I was. And I was, no, actually it might have been a different page. No, it was probably that page. Anyways, not important. I was painting, and I couldn't, and one of the autism videos, how do you know if you're a female autistic kind of thing, an adult female autistic, undiagnosed kind of thing, came on, and I couldn't stop because if the paint dried, it wouldn't work kind of thing. So I had to keep going until I finished. And so the video played, and I'm like, it's fine, it doesn't matter. But when they say the first couple of things and you're like, yeah, I kind of have that. And by the time I was done painting, she was on like 7, I couldn't tell you what video it was, I'm so sorry, but she was on like 7 or 8, and by this time I'm like 7 out of 7 or 8 out of 8, and I'm just like, what? No, that can't be. So I listened to I stopped what I'm doing and I just watched the rest of the video, and I'm like, when she says 30 things and you have 29 of them, it's like, I might be autistic. I'm like, what the, I'm sure at that point I was like swearing like a sailor a little bit, but it was an eye-opening experience and then I went on to watch many more videos and listen to many more videos about late diagnosis female autism and what it looks like in females, because it's drastically different than what it looks like in males, and as a society we don't really understand that. We can't pick them out of a crowd, but and then I've been thinking about it since November, and now it's, what are we in, April, so I've been giving it some good thought, and I think that I will, part of the thing I want to discuss on my Autistic Robot channel is, me getting diagnosed as autistic. I think that would benefit greatly because I believe that my sister is autistic, only more in the category of needs more support kind of thing. The poor lady has trouble holding a job and, has been beat up her whole life because she's probably autistic and didn't know it. But my thing is, as a teacher, you run into lots of, I'm going to move you up just a smidge, lots of things where, every time a new thing would come out, for example, we would find out, oh, did you know that there are introverts and extroverts? And, I always knew I was a loner, and I'm like, oh, I'm totally an introvert. That explains why I'm kind of different than the rest of society. Or I'm highly sensitive to so many things. That explains why I'm different than society. Or my favorite one, I'm a right brain person living in a left brain world. Or why do I prefer not owning lots of stuff? Because I can't organize anything. I don't have the gene for that. It's easier just to get rid of it and not have clutter in my life. Why do routines dictate my life? Why was I always considered quiet and shy? I'm like unusually highly creative when I can be, when things are good. When things are bad, not so much. I have this like much more rich inner world than an outer world. What were some of the other ones? Perfectionist, totally a masker. And as the day goes on, the mask starts to slip a lot, gets harder to be out there. So there's a whole bunch of things. I don't have to name them all. So if you're coming here and you think you are autistic or you are autistic, you know what I'm talking about. It's like instead of all those things just being independent things, maybe I am one thing, which is autistic, which I definitely think. So that's kind of how my world is upside down. I'm trying to make a whole bunch of changes in my life right now, moving to another state, getting a new job, getting out of teaching. There's a lot of adulting going on here, and yeah, my brain is kind of had it. So, it's trying hard to keep making the changes that I want to make. Added to that, go get diagnosed as possibly autistic. But, as I was watching the videos and learning about autism and what it looks like in adult females and what it looks like maybe as children females, I'm like, wow, okay, I can see why they overlooked it on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, wow, how ignorant did doctors need to be to think that it only happened in white males? I mean, that seems outrageous that they would even think that. At least, that's what some of the videos said, and I'm just like, that's appalling. But of course, that is the history of medicine to a certain extent. Certain populations were ignored, women were ignored, stuff like that. And so, as I'm watching the videos, and I'm rambling a little bit, I realize I'm sorry. I'm still trying to process everything, so I'm hoping the video channel will, help me do that, and people in the autistic community can help me out a little bit as well. But my understanding of stimming, and at first I didn't think that I had, as an adult now, I didn't think that I had a stim as I was sitting there coloring, listening to videos. Yeah. Anyways, you know how the brain works sometimes. But my understanding is, and I've been researching it, stimming is a form of expression. It's a form of expression. It's a response to different situations and sensory experiences, especially those that are overwhelming, I think, at least in my case. Provides emotional regulation. That's definitely true for me. You're self-soothing yourself, or you're trying to increase your focus, or get into that flow state. I think of it as the flow state. And art has been one of those things that helps me get into the flow state. Sometimes, like I said, I can be highly creative in art when things are okay. When things are not okay, I can't reach that that truly creative state. But I always wondered why just the act of painting a wall puts me into it's like a deep meditation. And actually, what I was doing was I was stimming when I'm painting a wall or coloring a page one color. I had no clue that that's what was happening. So, stimming happens when you're overwhelmed, sensory overload. Some people might call it anxiety. I've never really felt anxious. In my brain, I feel like I'm wound up. Tighter than a drum, At the end of the day, I can only explain it in visual terms. At the beginning of the day, my brain looks like this. And then, I take my long drive to work in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and, the brain's going like this. And then I have, oh my gosh, I think this is bad for me. I have a 10-hour shift, 4 10s. And, as the day goes on, the brain's I'm masking, and there's people, and there's noises, and there's smells, and there's, all kinds of stuff, and the brain's going like this. And then, oh my God, rush hour traffic coming home, and it is even worse. And, by the end of the day, I'm, I feel like I'm in an earthquake and a typhoon and a hurricane and every natural disaster that could happen at once. The brain is just vibrating at an uncontrollable state, in my case. That's how I would kind of describe it. And I have since learned, it clicked on me one time. It's I don't think I have a stim as an adult. I have stims from the past here, which I'll discuss in a little bit, but they're not stims that really work very well in the past, not compared to my current circumstances of life gone awry, basically. And then it dawned on me, it's oh my gosh, coloring is the stim. That's it. And I realized a few weeks later, it's like a specific kind of coloring. For example, when I showed you here, it's coloring the background or painting the background with paint or something like that, all one color or just a couple of colors or something like that. When I get to the foreground stuff, I need to be on my game because I can't think of like what colors I want to use if I'm all wound up and I need to stem. And some of my best ideas come when I'm stimming it as well. And I'll show you examples of that in a little later. That's more specifically for the coloring community. But anyways, some of my younger stems, I think as a child, was nail biting, watching TV, pacing. I remember one teacher pointing out to me that, oh, you're a leg swinger. So I'd be sitting in class and I'd have my legs crossed and one foot was just going like this the whole time. So that was probably a thing. I do a bit of hair twirling when I'm watching TV these days as an adult, but I have a pixie, so that's a little kind of hard. There was a time I quit nail biting recently. It's kind of started again, but I gave up nail biting in high school, but by the time college rolled around, I was pulling out my eyelashes, which I've heard people say in their channels. There was a time when I was into meal prepping and cooking was kind of a STEM, I think. When the internet first came out, I spent copious amounts of time online learning just different things, all kinds of different things. Surfing the internet. YouTube has been more of a STEM lately. Reading is a STEM. Sometimes when a conversation is going on for a long time with somebody that I don't want to be in that conversation, even today, I'll start swaying back and forth. Not quite rocking like you would see Rain Man do in that movie, but it's more of a gentle sway. It's like, okay, I'm ready to be gone from this conversation kind of thing. Doodling, of course, less so now. I did this weird thing when I was like, I want to say high school, college. I would just be laying in bed and when I go into a house, like I have to have every light in the house on, at least when I was young. I had cataract surgery at 50 and that's kind of switched now. I prefer it more darker. I don't like the light as much post-cataract surgery. That's kind of interesting. But I'm one of those people that would have to have every single light in the house on. But I would be laying in bed, the lights would be on, it's an overhead light, and I would just be staring at it without blinking. That can't be good for your eyes, but don't do that. That was probably some autistic tick or something that I had. I also, as an artist person, and I remember doing this in college, especially art school and stuff, I love to look at patterns and paintings and art history. I love the whole of art history. I could just spend hours looking through the books when I was learning art history and stuff, just looking at all the pictures. But I especially love patterns, so it's a very visual kind of STEM and very specific to just the artistic type of person that I personally am. So for STEMs, there are several different types. There's visual, auditory, that's sound, tactile, that's feeling, oral, that would be talking, smelling, vestibular, that's movement, and I can't even say this, proprioceptive, that's weight. I probably didn't even say that right, but that's weight. People who like to be under weighted blankets. And I didn't think I was that type of person until, I moved to a colder place. I lived in Arizona where it's very hot, and I would have like one little blanket on my bed. That would be it because it's hot. So I moved here and, I had 2 blankets, and then it got really cold and I added a 3rd blanket and I crawled into bed, I'm like, oh, it's just too cold and the heat can't keep up. And so I added the 3rd blanket and I crawled under there and it was heavy, and I was like, oh, this is nice. This is what they're talking about when they say like weighted blanket. Now I don't have a weighted blanket, but with 3 on the bed, it was heavy, and I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. So that might be a new thing for me. I'm discovering all kinds of new things here. So we've discussed why people stim. Oh, stimming is also found good for people with anxiety, people with autism, ADHD, those two things could be related in some cases. PTSD, anxiety, I already said, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, MS, and Tourette syndrome. And I know a lot of colorists out there, which is why I'm making this video, talk about how they got into coloring to stem the anxiety. And so I've watched colorists for a long time. I'm thinking there's some out there that, might be autistic. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't. Or maybe you're not, and maybe you just need to stem. I think most adults would probably benefit from some kind of stemming. So, hence, I'm making a video about it. But I want to talk to the coloring community about using stemming to further your coloring goals, both to calm you and then further your coloring goals, and maybe attack it a little more strategically. And then I want to talk to the autistic community about ideas for possibly things you might do to stem in the coloring world and beyond. So some of the things beyond, we can hit those first, and then we'll look at some pictures and books. Are repetitive motion things, and I'm sure there's other videos out there, people who've made them, but I'm thinking for those of you specifically interested in a repetitive motion stem that maybe is a little bit artistic, there's knitting, crocheting. In addition to coloring, there's paint by numbers, embroidery, quilting. I personally love to do puzzles, the ones you just put together. Diamond painting looks very stimming to me. I've not done, I don't know about any of those things except puzzles. Ceramics, I was a teacher of ceramics for 25 years, art, drawing, painting, ceramics, sculpture. And I can say that whenever there was a ceramics class and the students, it was new, and the students were there for the first time they got their hands in the clay, and students are talkative and excitable, and they come in, and then they get their clay, and we start working on the pinch pot, and it's got a certain tactileness to it. It's wet, it's cold, it's easily malleable. When they start, following the directions and making a pinch pot, which is always what we made first, the class of high schoolers, always the same reaction, dead quiet. They're all just focused on what they're doing. They're like in a mindful state, in a meditative state, and probably at first for them it's stimming. Now after the class goes on a while, they go back to normal behavior, and they enjoy the class because of what it is. But I believe that that's probably a really good stim, especially if you're tactile. My grandmother used to play solitaire with cards because, so I'm in my 50s, so, there wasn't solitaire on the computer or anything like that. Over and over and over for like 20 years, I saw her playing solitaire with the cards. She was probably stimming in that way. I would say that yoga and Tai Chi are probably stims, although I've done those and I hate them. Yoga and Tai Chi are just too slow for me. And I'm not terribly coordinated or bendy or anything like that, so it's kind of hard. However, I have enjoyed taking karate, and mostly what I like about karate is, standing in a line and learning the moves and doing them over and over, the front punch or the front kick. I don't remember what they were called. But the minute you switch up and you have to start like sparring with somebody, it's like, oh, then I hate it. But if I'm just learning the repetitive motions of the different moves or the katas, I love that if the teacher has enough patience for me to learn the kata, because not really my area there. It takes me a long time to learn those things. That's like a dance and not so coordinated at all. But I do love the act of doing that. So those are some ideas for stems. Now, specific coloring stems might be, like I said, coloring backgrounds, 1 to 3 colors. A lot of colorists on YouTube are color by number people. That may be the bulk of what they do each month, and then they just do a couple of non-color by numbers. I have a black and white book, and by the way, If any of these things you want, they'll be in the description below for you. You can just click the link. It's an Amazon affiliate thing, but you certainly don't have to. I usually don't even say it. I have a black and white book, which I started not knowing way back when that I just needed to stim, but you know, the act of picking up just the black pen and coloring it with it in the black and white book, this is what it kind of looks like uncolored. All I have to pick out is what I want to paint black, and I usually use pens like this, LLAP pens or micron pens to color. They're just kind of water-based markers. I would say they're water-based markers. You could also use a Sharpie though. You just want to make sure you put a piece of paper behind it. So yeah, looks like that. Just pick out what I want to color black. You know, one color, it's easy. You're just kind of, every other space is kind of black. That's how I kind of approach it. And that is my black and white mandala book, basically. You could also just do regular mandalas, and if you don't know about colors, you could use pre-made color schemes. You can just type in color schemes and they will come up. You want to look for something that's got, like, I'd say 4 to 7 different colors in it, 5 being kind of optimal. A 5-color scheme is what you're looking for. There are mandala books. There's lots of mandala books out there. This is meditation mandala. This is the first one I've done in this book that's of that kind. Now, these have very busy mandalas. I took a black paint and I blacked out a lot of stuff on this one, but you can see what I chose to color. There's lots of good mandala books that are Amazon print books. This is 50 Spiral Mandalas by Camilla Angelkova. If you don't know it, remember that name if you're not in the coloring world. She does lots of mandala books. She's really good at mandalas. This one happens to be mandalas that are of a spiral nature, which I really like. Like that. There's a few that I've done that might work for you. These are, the more simple it is, the more stemming it's going to be for me. So I started out by painting the rectangle, which was a stemming activity, and then I got into the actual mandala. So the only thing that was on, this is an altered page. We call it an altered page in the coloring community. That's because I added the rectangle and I added these little party things there. Okay. Another design book. So they're not all mandala books. This is modern damask motifs. And I've done one in here. And that was actually only using black and 3 colors. And this is alcohol marker. And I just did the whole page this light color of alcohol marker, so everything is colored. And then there's 2 other colors of alcohol marker in the same color family. And then black, with the addition of black. But this is kind of what they look like. They're all damask designs. The really busy ones, you know, I'll probably do that again, just color the whole page all one color. That way all the little doodads are done, and I can just worry about the other colors on the bigger elements of the page. All right. There's lots of good pattern books out there. This is Intricate Patterns by Jade Summer. Depending on what you like. These are very intricate. I like intricate. That seems to work for my brain. Sometimes if they're too simple, I don't like them, but you might go with simple mandalas. Or more complex. You're just going to have to, you know, play with it and see what you like. All right, I think that's all I'll show of those. Okay, so those are some ideas for the non-coloring community. For the coloring community, I already showed you that one. I didn't even know it, but I was using this method of one color way back when I first started coloring even. You can see it here. This one was completed in July 2021, and 21 was when I started coloring, so this was one of the first things that I did. And I know that I started this kind of in, I'm pretty sure it was May. I can look at my notes. We'll go with April or May, because May is the end of the school year. And by the end of the school year, most teachers, especially me, now I can see the pattern as autistic, but I'm done. Like, there are just so many demands on my person, my time, my energy, that mask that has to go up. Yeah. By the time you get home after a day of teaching, it's like you're done. And so I started this one because I specifically picked this page because I'm like, okay, I can go from red to black out here. Now, this stuff I added here, I added these designs, and I added that there's no place like home. Because as I was coloring and I would get past the stem, I would go through the whole stemming process, and then, I could be creative, and I would think, oh gosh, that's a lot of black to color. Maybe I should put something there. And eventually I was able to think of something, and probably by then the summertime had rolled around, and I was able to be a little more creative. But I specifically picked this page because I could go from red into the next color, into the next color, into purple, into the black, and I could just sit there after a hard day of school, after a whole year, and ready to be, done with these people. I could just do one color and blend it into the next color, and then that color would blend into the next color. That was basically a stem that I had, thought of for myself. And actually, the pattern holds. I have done that pretty much at the end of all 3 school years, and I didn't really even know that that's what I was doing. I was stemming. So my thinking is that you can use the stemming behavior to start things, and later, when you have more energy, when you're feeling better, etc., you can finish the pages. So like, I started that one in May, but I didn't finish it till July, well into the summer, when I'm starting to get better and relaxed because I've got all summer off. So now that I've moved to Oklahoma, out of the bad place, that's what I refer to it as. And when I was specifically house hunting and buying the house and that whole process, I would go to my work week, my 4 days of 10 hours a day, and then, I might have a day off, and then I would have to spend the other 2 days of my 3-day weekend looking at houses or going, having them inspected. There were 4 attempts to buy a house. Finally, the 4th one, I got a house. But during that time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even think anymore. I believe I had a little time off during the holidays, and I had just gotten this book. I didn't really have any books in my house too much, because they were all in storage, waiting for me to buy a house, so my little temporary apartment. So I'm like, I'm so tired, I can't even think. I just need to relax and color. And I'm like, well, if I could find something where I could just color one color. And I happened upon the Millie Murata book, Tropical World. I love this book. And bam, I did 3 in this during that whole time of like house hunting and, putting bids in and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm just going to start with a super dark green back here, and I'm going to color all that. Now, while I was doing that, I would have more lucid time, so we'll say, for lack of a better word. And I would be thinking, it's like, oh, well, I know I want to color all of the blades of grass here, greens, yellow ochres, maybe even to blue green. And there's even like lots of glittery stuff on there. And I know I want the bugs to stand out, so we could kind of do a pink and green. That was all thought of after I had started stemming. Like, I really had no preconceived notions. I just knew that I needed to take a pencil and do the background green, because I needed that mindful time, or that meditative time, whatever you'd like to call it, or even that mindless time. I like to refer to it as a mindless time, like I'm leaving my mind behind and just doing this thing. So I feel like good things can come out of stemming. So some other ones that I started around the same time, hadn't even finished that one. I also did this one. This is basically a stem as well. I had more of an idea on this one, and I started it after the Blades of Grass one. This is paint back here, and that was also stimming. It's like one color of paint in the background. Now, I had tediously painted around all the leaves that were here. I didn't like it, and so I went back and painted over the leaves. I thought they were distracting from the picture, but, you know, that was after kind of the stimming did the stims job for me, basically. And another one I have that I also did, actually I remember working on this one when I had moved into my new house here. And this is basically, again, I moved into a new house. It's like, oh my God, you know, I just need to sit down and color 1 or 2 colors. This is actually a 3-color background here. And I prefer Prismacolors, although, you know, could be anything, it doesn't matter. And then, you know, I knew going in I had a color scheme. I wanted these to be kind of blacks and purples, and I wanted the background to be dusk, like they're just waking up. The sun is setting, they're waking up. And that led to secondary color schemes. So we got purple, orange, and green. Those are the secondary colors. So that's how that came about. All just because of the need to stem. So one of the reasons that I'm talking about this is way back in my early days, there was somebody who left a comment on my channel. It's one of my early videos. And they said, and I could relate to this so well, which is why I remember it from like 3 years ago, that their job is so stressful, and they didn't say what they did. I have no idea. I envisioned like a doctor or something. I don't know what they did, but you know, I was trying to think of what's so stressful. They could have been a teacher, because that is like one of the most stressful jobs out there. But they wrote that their job is so stressful that all they can do when they get home is sit at their desk and look at their coloring supplies and their coloring books and not make decisions about anything to color or what to do. They're in such a state from the stress of their life that they can't do anything. So what I have recently started doing, I've become smart about it. I'm like, oh, it's a stem. I need to stem because it releases the pressure, we'll say, for lack of a better word. And so I can't do it, you know, my 4-10 days and, you know, 2 hours of traffic each way and bumper to bumper traffic. I can't pick out something on those days. I have to have it, I've gotten smart just recently. I've got to have it pre-picked out. And so one of these, this one here, this is Occult and Folklore Coloring Book. This was just from Stimming. This is, if you're still here, from the autistic community. This is what we in the coloring community call a wallpaper page, and that's because it's a repeating pattern on a page. And I've done many of those and loved them in the past, and I didn't realize that, you know, it was because it was easy and it was stemming. Now, the background is Prismacolor. We've got 2 colors here. There's this background color here and these little bubble things here, and then there's the darker background color in these bubble things here. And that was pre-picked out to be able to come home and just pick up the pencil and start to color. If I don't have anything that I'm stemming come the 4-day work week that I have, then I'm not going to be stemming at night when I most need it. And, you know, by the end of the week, I'm kind of toast, you know, kind of burnt and done. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the 4-day work week, and everybody's like, they love it. I'm like, I hate it. I think it's just when you add the up to 2 hours of commute time in there, it's just too much, you know, too much masking. And then usually I have to go to the store or something, because here's the thing. Once I'm home on Friday night, I'm usually not leaving again until Tuesday. I'm in my sanctuary and we're not leaving it. So nothing better happened, because we're not usually leaving it. Unless there's some, you know, circumstance for which I need to leave. I have to go to the bank because I can only go to the bank on Monday. Or I have 0 food in the house and I must go get food, you know. we're usually not leaving it. We're toughing it through. It's like if we have to eat canned food, we're going to eat canned food and go to the store later. So on those 4-10 days is when I really have to go out and do the outside the house errands and chores and stuff like that. So yeah, I probably make my life harder than it needs to be, but that's just how I roll as an autistic person. In Daydreams here, the same thing. I needed to get this done, which I didn't. Yeah, it was a group buddy color, what we call in the coloring community, for last month, and I didn't get it done. But I was able, this is just paint in the background, and I knew I wanted it to be bark, and I knew I needed to have the stem, so I started painting it, especially when the HVAC people were here replacing my HVAC, because yeah, adulting. Buy a house and then your HVAC goes out. Awesome. While they were here, actually, because I was like trapped in my dining room, and that was the only place I could be because I just have a little bitty 2-bedroom condo. It's not big. They took up the whole hallway, and they took up the living room with all their stuff, and I had the kitchen, and I cleaned in the kitchen for a little while, and then I decided to get my painting out and paint because people were in my sanctuary, and I was freaking out. And this, it was a little hard to paint while they were here, but also it mitigated the problem of them being in my house and doing crazy things in my house. So yeah, so that was paint in the background. I am now going over the top with, and that was in one of my other videos, my last robot report of how I'm making the bark. So you can check that out if you're interested and in the coloring community or not. Anybody can check it out. But yeah, that was a stem that just happened to be using paint. So furthering my goals. Here's another stem. Again, another Millie Murata book. I find the Millie Murata books are fabulous for stemming. And there's a few other books that I think are going to be great for that purpose too. I feel like I might be able to, maybe I'm just going to be making myself a bunch of whips. I'm not really sure. But hopefully I will be able to take this information and get more coloring done instead of coming home and being like, oh, I can't even color because my brain's just not there. I can channel it, to have more towards my coloring goals, that I would like to finish some pages. Now, it's not a race for me. I don't really care how many pages I get done. I'm always blown away by those people who can get so many pages done, but that's not me. I don't want to put that pressure on myself. But, I might be able to do more things. So this was just another stemming thing I did. I think there's also 3 colors here, 3 different reds, and then those are giant squids, in case you can't tell in the picture. I love things with movement, and I think the patterns are also a visual stem to myself. So I think that's why I'm leaning towards that lately. I also think that the Sarah Muzio books are very much like different styles, but very much like the Millie Murata books. This is in Harmony. I've started one in here somewhere. And I've just it's the background. It's one color. This is actually a Crayola colored pencil instead of a Prismacolor. This is turquoise. While I was doing that, just stemming, because I wasn't able to do it for 3 out of the 4 work days that I worked, I was doing it on Saturday or Sunday. I don't know when I started. But as I was doing it, I'm like, I got to these big spaces, and I'm like, oh, that's really hard to color with a Crayola. With a Prismacolor, it's not a problem. With a Crayola, it's hard. I got to this big section, I'm like, oh. And then it dawned on me, because the stemming had worked, and I could reach that creativity that I had. I'm like, oh, we need little alien ships floating around in the beautiful garden walk. I forgot what I titled it. It's in a video somewhere. Probably gonna air after this, but I decided this would be Sputnik Garden or something, so I drew, and I showed in the video. You'll see it eventually. I just drew myself a little spaceship there, and I did the pencil trick on the back, and I just traced it. It's there, it's there, it's there. I just traced it a few times. I love backgrounds where the background is broken up and I have to go around like all these little things, especially if I'm using a pencil. If it's a bigger open background, I'm more likely to do a fade or something, or even paint. That's a good place to paint and get my stimming in that way. But yeah, that's another stem, and because I was stemming and actively looking at the page the whole time, I was able to come up with something creative. That's what I mean by use stemming to be a jumping off place and then further your coloring goals. So I think that pretty much sums up everything that I wanted to say to both, demographics of people, the coloring world and the non-coloring world. Perhaps the non-coloring world, you might consider using coloring. You could even use little kid coloring books and Crayola crayons. It's just the act of the repetitive motion. You don't have to do anything fancy like me, a person in the arts my whole life would do to STEM. You don't have to have those kind of goals. You can do something simple. And those of you who, are in the coloring community or interested in joining it or whatever, might use that as a stepping off place to further your coloring goals. Okay, and if you're interested, there are different mediums you can explore. It doesn't have to be colored pencils or paint. There's alcohol markers, water-based markers, inks. There's all kinds of stuff you can play with. All right, well, that is it. Please put your comments below, your advice, your questions. I'm not sure what Autistic Robot is going to be about. It's going to be about the glimpse into the life of an autistic person getting a diagnosis, that whole process of trying to get diagnosed as an autistic person. I'm not sure that I really need it, but can't hurt to have it in the back pocket, And from both channels, Doodle Robot and Autistic Robot, I thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.